Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Kesubos, Parakeh, Chapter 5, Mishna Ches, Mishna 8. All right. So the Mishnah is going to be talking about the what a husband is obligated to give his wife as her basic needs, and he's going to give it in a very interesting format. Hamashres Ishla Yedei Shalish, a person who gives his wife food through a third party. That means that basically they don't eat together. He has her in a separate place, and he has someone in charge to make sure that she gets what she needs. That's what it means. He's feeding her through a third party. They're not together when they eat. She's separate from him, and he has to appoint someone that's going to make sure that she gets what she needs. That's the way the Mishnah kind of lays out the scenario here. So what does he have to do? What does he have to give his wife? Typically if they're living together, they're just going to eat together. Here you got to delineate, okay, if they're not eating together, what does he have to give her? So in that the Mishnah says, Lo yivchas la mishnei kabin chitin. He cannot give her less than 2 kabin of wheat. A kav is a dry measure. Oy marba kabin sa'irin, or 4 kabin of barley. Okay, the grain, or the grain to basically make bread. It's going to have to either be 2 kavin of wheat or 4 kavin of barley. Okay. Now this amount that we're talking about. So first of all, I'm going to start with the notes bring down here. Is that number one? This whole setup about her being her food being given to her by a third party is only something she agrees to it. If she doesn't agree, she wants to be together with him when they eat. He doesn't have a right to do this. Here we're talking about she agreed to do it. That's number one. Number two. The amounts that we're mentioning here are minimum amounts that even a poor man must provide his wife. A more affluent husband must support her in a manner that befits his wealth. Okay? So basically, this is the minimum. Somebody who can give more certainly has to do more. Okay. What is what's to understand by this amount? 2 kavin of wheat, 4 kavin of barley. So at least the measurements, they bring down again here. 2 kavs of wheat. Okay, listen. Make a little calculation here. 2 kavs of wheat produce the volume of 48 eggs of flour, which provides 16 loaves of bread, each loaf containing the volume of 3 eggs of flour. This is enough for 2 meals each day and 2 extra meals for guests. In those days, they ate 2 meals, not 3 meals. There are 2 meals a day. So you're covering 2 meals a day, plus 2 extra meals if she hosts someone. The third meal that one must eat on Shabbos is included in this calculation. I mean, if you think about it, right? You're talking about 16 loaves of bread, right? That's 7 days a week, 7 times 2 for herself, right? Is 14. 2 more for guests, but on Shabbos you're supposed to have 3 meals. So there's a third meal missing. Next Mishnah will answer that issue about the third meal. Okay, but this whole calculation is to work it out in this way. All right. The Mishnah then continues. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi said, "Lo pasak la sa'irim el Rabbi Yishmael." The amount of sa'irim, the 4 kavin of sa'irim that I mentioned in the previous Mishnah, Rabbi Yishmael only gave that amount. It was only Rabbi Yishmael who gave that amount, sheyasamach le'edom, that he lived near Edom. When you lived near Edom, the barley was extremely poor quality, and therefore you had to give double the amount of wheat. But according to Rabbi Yossi, in other places, however, the amount of barley need not be so great. It doesn't have to be double the amount. It doesn't have to be 4 kavin. How much does it have to be? So on the bottom here they bring down, it's the local court, the Beis Din, that decides how much barley is required. But that's all according to Rabbi Yossi. According to the Tanna Kama, according to the first opinion, your sa'irin, if you're giving her sa'irin, it's always double the amount of wheat, everywhere. That's what Tanna Kama holds. Tanna Kama holds barley, which is already of a lesser quality. You have to go ahead and give her double the amount of what you would give her in wheat. All right, so that's the first part of the Mishnah that's dealing with the grains that you have to give her for bread. Now, what else do you give her? V'noisein la chatzi kav kitnis. You give her a half a kav of kitnis are legumes, right? From Pesach, right? Legumes. Okay. V'chatzi lug shemen. A half a lug. A lug is a liquid measure of oil. V'kav gregris. A kav of dried figs. A mana devela, or a mana of pressed figs. Now, if you're giving her fresh figs or raw figs, right? You're giving her a kav. A kav is a volume, right? So when you're dealing with dried figs, the dried figs are measured by a kav, which is a volume. The pressed figs are measured. It's called it's a mana, which is actually a weight. When you press the figs together, you typically measure it by its weight. All right, so you're giving her beans, you're giving her figs, okay? Vim ein loi, and if let's say he doesn't have any of these, he doesn't have the figs, Paisik lumasan paris makamacher, he then has to provide her an equivalent measure of other fruits. Okay, so he's got to give her some kind of fruits, and this is what the Mishnah says he gives her if it comes to the figs. Whether it's the dried figs or the pressed figs, if he doesn't have those, then he has to basically provide her an equivalent amount of other fruit. Okay, that's when it comes to the food. What else does he have to make sure she has? He gives her what they translate as a bed, a cushion, and a mat. So in the notes, they explain like this. What is exactly each one? In those times, the bed typically consisted of a frame with rope stretched from one side to the other. That's your mita, that's your bed. The next part that says you give her a mapatz is a hard mat was laid on the stretched ropes to prevent them from cutting into one's skin. That's the mapatz, that's the mat, okay? And then you have a softer mat or cushion what was placed over the hard mat. So each one is representing each part of the entirety of the bed. Okay? So those were the words they could give just what the words were, a bed, a cushion, and a mat. Okay, but that's how it's explained. Next. What?
The expression sleep tight. The ropes have to be tight.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Now, V'noisei la kipa la roisha v'chagar la masneha. And he gives her a cap for her head and a belt for her waist. Right? Umin olim and shoes, mimayid l'mayid, from yantif to yantif. Every yantif, meaning every yantif, shalosh regalim. Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkos. She gets a new pair of shoes. So they bring that here from the bottom, that this is talking about where you live in a place where the shoes get worn out quickly. It's a rugged place, it's a rocky place, so therefore you got to give her shoes 3 times a year. If you'd be living in a different place, you'd give her shoes accordingly. You wouldn't have to give her the shoes then like that. You give her shoes accordingly. Why on Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkos? Because there's a mitzvah to gladden your wife with clothing on these by the Shalosh Regalim, and therefore, if you give her the shoes, then you'll be accomplishing the mitzvah of Simchas Yantif for your wife, gladdening her Yantif at the same time that you're giving her what she basically needs. Now, the Kalim Shal Chamishim Zuz Mishana Lashana. Kalim here means clothing. You have to give her 50 zuz worth of clothing from one year to the next. Okay? So clothing goes from year to year. Every year, you got to give her new clothing. The amount you give her is 50 zuz. Now, they bring down here on the bottom that, first of all, the words from one year to the next, right? It says you give her v'kelim shachamishim zuz mishana l'shana. Clothing worth 50 zuz from year to year. So the words from year to year do not refer only to the 50 clues of clothing, but also to the cap and belt. You get a new cap and belt every year. Okay? However, the words shoes from one holiday to the next are not connected to that, right? The shoes go according to they given each holiday, again, depending on the situation where they are needed like that. And as for the bed, cushion, and mat, a husband does not have to replace them on a regular basis, but only as needed. So shoes have a regular replacement. A cap and the belt have a regular, have a regular replacement time. The clothing have regular replacement time. But the bed does not. Bed is really going to be, basically according to need. They also say here the sum of 50 zuz for clothing applies only in the time of the Mishnah and in Eretz Yisrael. In other times and places, the husband must provide the minimum that accords with the prevailing custom and practices, whether it is more or less than 50 zuz. 50 zuz here was according to that time in Eretz Yisrael in the Mishnah. Mm-hmm. Likewise, the types and amounts of food depend on the place and time. So that whole list of foods mentioned before is also in Eretz Yisrael in the times of the Mishnah, but those also will depend and differ on place and time. Okay? Now, the last part of the Mishnah tells us about the clothing. He does not give her new clothing in the summer, nor the older or worn out clothing in the winter, in the rainy season. Why? Because the new clothing, which is heavier, is more uncomfortable in the summer, and the worn out clothing is not going to provide enough warmth for the rainy season from the winter, from the cold. You give her the new 50 zuz worth of clothing in the winter season, when it's still, when they're still new and heavy. And then by the time the summertime comes and they're already worn out and thinner, that's what she wears during the summer. Now, after the summer, right, she's getting a new pair of clothing for the winter. What happens to the old clothing of the summer? She keeps it. What does she keep? That's what it means at the end. And the worn out clothing remains by her. She keeps it. For what purpose? To wear them when she is a nida. Oh. So wear them that. There was a practice that when she wore her nida clothes, that when she was a nida, she wore not the same kind of clothing that she wore when she wasn't a nida. And therefore, what does she wear during the nida? When she's a nida, when she has her period, she wears that worn out clothing. That's what she wears then. So even after he gives her the new clothes in the winter, when she's a nida, she wears that separate clothing, the worn out clothing. When she's not a nida, that is when she wears that. That's when she wears the newer clothing.
No fish and meat.
Nope.
No?
No mention of it. Mediterranean diet. Okay. Next. Now again, just to say, if he's poor, right? These amounts were given. These are the minimum amounts. If he can afford more, he's supposed to give more. Does that mean that includes fish and meat? Depends on the custom of the area. Okay. Now, the Chofetz Chaim said that in a situation where you know that the person was cheated, he has the ability to go ahead and get back and fix the wrong that was done to him, then you tell him. However, again, there are a number of conditions that are necessary. And that is, don't exaggerate what happened. Don't exaggerate either the lack of quality that he was tricked with or the amount of money he was tricked with. Don't overdo it. Be exactly exactly factual. That's number one. Number two, you have to be doing this for the purposes of helping out the person who got cheated out. Not because you are happy to see that the cheater, who really was a scoundrel, got caught and messed up. That's not supposed to be your intention. Your intention should be solely for the person who you mean to help. And within this condition, we have another detail, and that is pretty much the same idea in itself. It has to be that not only is your intention to help the person, but that there actually will be some kind of benefit from it. if you know that the person got cheated out, he's not the kind of person who's going to get into fights and to get into quarrels. He doesn't like getting into confrontation with anyone, and basically that means he's not going to really get involved and do anything about it. The only thing that's going to come out, he's going to be upset and he's going to be very angry at the other person. If that's all that's going to come out, you should not tell him. And the more so if he asks you in that manner, in the manner that, I'm not really going to do anything about this, but, what happened there? Mm-hmm. You don't tell him because, again, if there is no actual benefit that's going to come out of it, you don't tell it to him. Mm-hmm. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.